my sustenance for the next half hour or so. Welcome everybody to the 82nd Reading Online Sport Economics Seminar, or ROSES. We've been meeting for 2 years now with the COVID pandemic. And for 2 years, I don't know, I mean, I suspect many of us have experienced the virus itself over that 2 years. For me, I managed to dodge the bullets for an awfully long time, but then I now have, I'm sure maybe you're all familiar with these, but it's now finally caught up. So we started meeting because of COVID, and COVID obviously catches up with us all eventually. But thankfully, we can still meet because COVID doesn't transmit across teams as far as we're aware. And so we can still carry on enjoying the finest research in the area of economics and sport, as we have been doing for the past 2 years. This week, it's really exciting to have a new sport, as far as I'm aware, in the series with chess. And we have Jose de Sousa from Paris, who's going to present. And I don't have his title to hand, but it's to do with affirmative action and a case study in France, trickle-down effect of that. Jose has specifically asked that questions come as he goes along, so there isn't quite the same impetus for you to wait until the Q&A at the end. Jose would prefer to have the Q&A as we go along, so therefore feel free to interrupt Jose as he goes along if you have questions that you want him to clarify on. I guess the one final thing though, just to say before I start is some of you will be familiar with the background. The background that I've got is Gijón, where the sports economics conferences over the years have been. The next sports economics conference in Gijón will be in May 6th, 7th. I don't know if yet the call for papers is out, but you might want to mark your diaries if you can for the 6th and 7th of May. Another thing to say, I mentioned Hannah Altman's call for papers for a session at the Western Economic Association conference later on this year. And there are also other sports economic sessions at the Westerns. So please do consider submitting to the Western Economic Association International Conference for this year. And if you do want to share information on calls for papers for those, please do use the chat if you're able to. But without any further ado, Jose, please do take away your talk. And if folk do have questions along the way, please do ask them directly to Jose.
Okay, I hope you see my screen. Let me full screen. Yeah, is it good?
Yep, can see it all. That's great.
Good. Thank you very much for trusting me. Stop there. Okay. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for attending. Just to start with a small anecdote is that ROSES is also the name of the lab where I did my PhD, which was in the University of Paris 1, so it's part of Paris School of Economics. And the director of this lab was someone that you know, that it was Vladimir Andreev. So it was interesting. But this lab was about international economics, so nothing to do with sports economics. But okay, so I'm going to present this paper with Meryl Niederle on trickle-down effects of affirmative action. But first, I have other papers on sport economics, and let me, without any shame, give some advertisement to those papers. So the first is about soccer and football. And I wanted to mention this paper because it's related to a paper by Stefan. I don't know if he's here in the attending, but I'd like to thank him for all the comments and support, and also his great paper he published in the GP, where he has this market test for discrimination that we use also in this paper, because the idea is that we use the Bosman ruling. So he stopped before the Bosman ruling, showing that Black English players were discriminated in the Premier League. And we extended the data set to account for the Bosman ruling, with the idea that with the Bosman ruling, you have relaxed labor mobility constraints, so low monopoly power clubs cannot act on the prejudice, and so discrimination disappears or should disappear. And this is what we find. And I have other papers on chess. And so, is chess a sport? So, according to the International Olympic Committee, chess is a sport. But for example, Australia, if I remember correctly, would disagree, because they think that the sport should involve some physical strength and physical activity, and so they consider that moving pieces and like wood pieces is not not a sport. I'm not sure it's very different that the darts, for example, where there's another José de Sousa. But okay, so back to chess. I have a paper that which is about peer competition because, and this is related also. What we talked today is that in chess we also there are also the team competitions, and when you have good peers, you can learn from them, right? So I'm sure that those football players who are playing with Messi, they learn from him, right? But they may ended up in the bench, and so this is what we find using chess. Good peers may also steal the spotlight. And then I have also two other papers on chess and gender differences. I'm going to mainly focus on the last one, but I will say something also on this from micro to macro gender differences because they are somewhat related. Okay, so let's move to this trickle-down effects of affirmative action. Let me also put this into a broader context because ideally, if we want to study the effects of an affirmative action, probably we should study three levels. The first level is should use this. It's the direct effect. So the effect on those who are selected by the quota, for example, if you think about a quota. So obviously, if the quota is binding, you will see an increase in representation of the minority, for example. But then there's this question about the performance. So do they increase their performance, right? So there's another question. So beyond those selected, which is related to trickle-down or spillover effects on the whole pool of women, for example, if it's a gender quota, are they more eligible and better qualified? And then related to the efficiency of the affirmative action or the quota, there's this question about the negative externalities on those who are displaced, right? If you think about gender quota, it would be what are the costs for men? Okay, so ideally for any affirmative action, you have those three questions and you want to answer them. So if we think about the gender quota, we have some empirical challenges. First, to show improvements of the selected woman, then the trickle-down effects on the pool of women, and finally, not too large externalities on men, right? So if you want to answer those questions, you need a clear affirmative action policy, and you need an environment where you have a good measure of ability, or at least individual performance. And since you are sport economists, you know that it's really hard to get, right? So, for example, how to measure the performance of a football player could be the goal score, but it's not only that, right? So it's hard. Then sometimes we have data on those who are selected, but we want data on the whole pool, right? To look at trickle-down effects or externalities. And finally, we also want sufficient time, right? Because sometimes it's a recent policy, and so you don't see the impact on education and development, for example, of human capital. Okay, so I mean, I'm not going through the literature, but there are like huge improvements in literature, but it's really hard to find an environment where you have this three requirements, right? Individual performance, the whole pool of players or individuals, and sufficient time. So what we propose is an environment which can be, I mean, a bit strange for an economist, and which is chess. And the chess is probably not interesting per se, even if it's a great game, but chess has those advantages. So first, let me picture this game between a former National Football League player who was recently graduated from MIT in math. So playing against this little girl, and because chess is more about skills than about age, about size, about gender, she won the game, right? It's just an anecdote, but just to illustrate that there is no reason that why the woman should be not competing against men at the same level. Okay? This has some advantages. First, there's this ELO rating, which is a predictive measure of individual performance, and this measure depends on the history of play, and also it's a very good predictor of the near future performance of the next game, of the result of the next game. So let me give you some details on this ELO rating. So it's a numerical grading that indicates the as I say, the stock, right? But this stock can go up and down depending on your performance, right? If you lose a game, you're going to decrease the stock. If you win, you're going to increase the stock, and then you can draw the game, and it depends really on the strengths of your opponents. But beginners, they start with 1,000 points, and then you can go all along 2,800. You are the world champion. Okay, but it's super hard to gain those points. But if you train, you may gain them and become world champion. And robots, they're probably 3,000 or more than 3,000. What's interesting is that the World Chess Federation, that's called FIDE, calculates this rating at regular intervals, and also consistently across countries. So we can compare countries and periods over time. Let me give you more details about this rating. So imagine that I'm player I and I'm playing against James, for example, right? So and we have a formula which is a logistic formula, which is the one used by the FIDE to compute the rating. And if James and I, we have the same number of points, the same ELO points, then this expected score is going to be 0.5, right? So my probability of winning against James will be 50%. So then we have this expectation, right? So which is expectation of the future performance, and then there's the score of the game, like this Sij, right? So if I lose the game, then I'm losing points because my rating today is my rating yesterday, plus the difference between the score of the game and this expectation. And if I lose the game, it will be 0 minus 0.5 because we have the same rating, James and I. And so I will lose K times this negative 0.5, okay? So I'm losing games and James winning game. I'm losing points, sorry, and James is winning points. Okay, and this prediction is this expected value is expected score is a good predictor because here we report in red. So like this dashed red line here it's the prediction from this logistic curve, right? So this means that if I'm 100 points lower in ratings than James, my probability is only 36%. So I have only 36% chance of winning against James. And when you look at the data, and for each difference we compute the mean score, you see that the mean score, which is in black here, dashed black, it's decreasing also with the difference between the two players. So there are some differences, but the fit is pretty good. I don't know if you have questions about this rating or if it's clear. I hope so, but you never know. Okay, so we have this rating, okay, which is it's a good predictor of your performance, and it's important to measure this performance ability. Then there is another advantage that we have using chess is that we have the pool of registered chess players, right? So we have those who are gonna be selected in an affirmative action because we have an affirmative action in France in the 1990s, but also the others like the men and the women who are not selected. Okay. So and as I said, we have this gender affirmative action, which was a clear affirmative action introduced in France in 1990. But first, let me give you some information on women because to document why. I mean, something should be done to help a woman in chess. Okay. And so first, I'm going to concentrate on this woman in chess. Then I'm say something about this affirmative action quota. And I'm going to also try to study the effects of this quota. And I would say something about an application beyond chess. By the way, this application beyond chess will be applied to the case of UK and the universities of UK if you are still around after the end of the talk. Okay, so women chess. So remember you have this rating, which is this FIDE rating, so international rating. And when you see the list of international rated players, you find only 12% of women, so a very small number. And if you look at the highest title, which is the Grandmaster title, you will find only 2% of women, right? So very small again. If you go deeper and you look at the top 100, currently there is one woman. 6 in the top 500, 22 in the top 1,000. So we call this the huge female problem because there is this difference, right? Okay. Still, there is one woman called Judith Polgar, and she was the only woman to qualify for the World Championship, but she got there and she entered in the top 10 in 2005. So, and she was amazingly good. She retired now, but she was one of the few top women in chess. Okay, so one reason that we have this female problem could be attitudes, right? Attitudes toward female. So take this Judith Polgar. She had to fight against a lot of men. I don't know if you are aware of this. If you've seen this Queen's Gambit, which series, Netflix series, which is a great one. I recommend with my policy recommendation for today. And if you look at this series, there is only one woman, and she's competing against men. For Judith Polgar was basically the same. And Kasparov, Garry Kasparov, the world champion, like former world champion, said about Judith Polgar that she has fantastic chess talent, but she's after all a woman. And it all comes down to the imperfections of the feminine psyche, and no woman can sustain a long battle. Okay, it appears that she could because she won against him later on, right? So when she was a bit older. Then her sister, because she has two sisters, Judith, and one called Susan. She said that when she was 16 or 17, that she never won against a healthy man. Right after the game, it was always an excuse. I had a headache, had a stomachache. There was always something. Fortunately, the recent attitudes are not great, but I can show you the more recent ones. But yeah, not much better. Okay, so this could explain that in 1990, France decided to do something about women chess. But let me also show you so this is based on the other work I have with Guillaume Mollard, where we have here it's about individual tournaments, and we have millions of games, and here is the density of the rating for men in blue here, and and in red here for women. So you see that it's shifted on the right for men. On average, they have higher rating. One difference could be that there's a difference in age between these two groups. So women, they tend to be younger, and this is helping them, by the way. But they're younger, and for men, you see also that a lot of young players, but also a bump here. So like more older players entering to chess, entering chess a bit later when they're a bit older. Okay, so we have this gender differences in rating, gender differences in age. And but what is great about chess is that you have, as I said, many different countries, right? So what we do in this graph is that we report the mean rating of different countries, and for men and also for women, right? So, and we have this 45-degree line, and in this line, you should be equality between these two means, right? So, for example, if for women it's 2,200, should be the same for men, right? This is not what we find, because for the bunch of countries that we have here, they're all below the 45-degree line, and so when men are better on average, women tend to be better. For example, China, there are better women and better men than in Portugal, right? But you see that there is a difference in average rating between men and women in all the countries. This is what we call in this paper the macro gender gap. And then there is this micro gender gap, because in chess we have millions of individual games, and so we can analyze them, and we find that women's scores are about 2% lower than expected when playing a man rather than another woman, but with identical rating, age, and also federation. So we find this macro and micro gender gap, and we try to relate those. Okay, so this is about the situation of women in chess, right? So few women, and also few women at the top. So let's try to do something. And in this paper, we assess the impact of gender quota. I don't know if we have questions, or if it's clear, or if there's an information that is missing. Otherwise, let me move on. So about the affirmative, yeah.
Jose?
Yeah.
There's a question from Hannah.
Yeah, Anna.
It's actually going to be, we're in the same camera, so it's from both of us, it's from me.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a few questions, but you wanted questions while you were speaking anyway, right? You didn't want them bunched at the end, is that right?
No, I mean, if it's sometimes it's because there are clarification questions because chess is a peculiar environment. It's probably not particularly known. So if you have clarification questions, I will be happy to ask. So
maybe I'll ask one question, which is,
yes.
I might have misunderstood something.
Yes.
But when you talk about wins and losses for chess,
yes.
Do you look at the extent of the loss? Because there might be, somebody might slaughter somebody. That's a loss. Somebody might win just on the margin. That's a loss.
Yes.
But losing the margin or winning in the margin is different from being slaughtered or being beaten by a significant margin. Is that at all accounted for in your statistical methodology?
No. Here, basically, the utility of the player is to win the game. Okay, so it's not about maximizing or minimizing the number of moves, for example, or the beauty of the game. It's really about winning or not. So winning at the margin or crushing the opponent does not count here for the rating, at least.
Okay, just so it's a binary. Okay.
It's exactly so. It's 0 if you lose, 0.5 if you draw the game, and 1 if you win the game. That's it. So then, if you want to say something about like a quick win or not, in that case we have to look at the moves per se. But there are papers that are looking at the moves using computers to assess the quality of the moves. They're doing that, but at least in the rating is not considering the quality of the win. If you say it's just about winning or not. So it could be that you are losing the game, and at one point the opponent makes a big mistake, and you win, and it's a bit underserved, but it will be a win. Yeah. And I will be happy to take other questions.
Yeah, Ian's got a question as well for you, Jose.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a question or?
Yeah, I don't think we can hear you, Ian.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. So one explanation for the gender gap in chess amongst chess players that I've heard before is to do with participation, just the volume of players.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been articles on like chess.com about this, and the argument goes that it's just that men play chess more than women do, so they're just like in a ratio of 10 to 1. There are just many more male players.
Yes.
So the ones that then go on to play this competitively have a higher natural ability just because they're the lower ones drop out. Whereas in the case of women, the same process of dropout is at play, but just because there's so few of them to begin with, the average is lower that you end up observing. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, rather than it being like overt discrimination or poor attitudes that are explaining the gap.
Oh, I mean, this is one explanation. I think it could be a valid one, because if you have a pool of players and then going to the top is just a random draw, it's true that more players will be easier to have a larger pool, I would say. But this is also to explain why they're not getting to the top, right? But if you look at this picture, even like in Portugal, the players, I mean, are not that strong, even for men, for women. So here we're not talking about Carlsen, right? We're talking about players with on average 1800. So basically we see this difference even when the proportion of women is higher, or is high or low, right? So it's true that it's above 10%, but for some countries the share is higher, and we still find those differences. In other countries the share is very low, and find them. So it could be one explanation, but I'm not sure is the only one.
For sure, I don't believe it would be the only explanation, but perhaps one of several. Yeah.
Yes, it could be one. Yeah. Yeah, sure. But we don't. We didn't focus on this one. Yeah. Thank you. Now let me move to this affirmative action. So chess players, they play in individual tournaments, and mostly individual tournaments, but they also play in club competitions. So and in club competitions, it will be like within a country, one city against one another, for example. And so the clubs in one city, they tend to bring the best 8 players. So it will be 8 against 8. And basically it's the best against the best, right? So it's individual games, but the best against the pairings will be the best against the best, 8 against 8 at two cities. I'm gonna give you an example just to make that clear. In 1990, an affirmative action was introduced in Division 1 in France. The meeting was quite contested, but with all the debates about the positive and negative effects of affirmative actions. But it was implemented in 1990, and every club had to bring 9 players. So instead of 8 against 8 before 1990, it was 9 against 9. So it was a nice introduction of the affirmative action, because it was not displacing, at least at the beginning, the start of the affirmative action, a man, right? So instead of 8 against 8, it was 9 against 9, and at least one had to be a French female player. Then it was introduced in 1991 and 1992. So let me give you an example of a match to make this things clear. And the match was Lyon against Bordeaux, like 2 cities in France. And we have the ID of the number that we track. So we have the history of the players, the elo of the players, this number, the gender, the federation, and the age. Okay, and then the individual scores. And so what you see is that the players are ranked by decreasing order, so to be basically the best against the best. And here you find that there's a woman in the top, in the bottom, sorry, of the Lyon, and a woman here. So they are playing against each other. But in chess, like in many other sports and other environments, there is associative matching, in the sense that the best players tend to be together, like best males with the best females and the best clubs. But look at this woman with this rating, could have played easily on the top of this Bordeaux, right? So she's not obliged to be stuck at the last board. Okay. This is to give you an example of what is a match in a chess match, where Lyon won because they scored more points. Okay, now let me talk about the effects of the affirmative action. So first, the direct effects, right, on the woman selected by the quota. Here today, I'm going to focus mainly on the performance of those women. So the question: do women improve their performance, their elo rating over time? The data will be French club championships from 86 to 2015, so before the quota in Division 1. We have 5 divisions, but not all the years, unfortunately, for the 5 divisions. And also the divisions, they change. So what we do is that, and today I'm going to focus on the top 12 teams, right? And we take each year the best 12. And then we extend to the next 208 teams, because in that case, we're gonna focus on lower teams and more average players. So first, we have this result on the extensive margin. I'm not going to show it today, but if you have questions, I will be happy to show with some evidence. And the question is, are more women playing in this club championship and under the affirmative action or not? And the answer is yes, but mostly not beyond the quota. So in a sense, 1 woman is required in each team, and what we find is 1 woman. Okay, so and this over 25 years. So not much action here, but I'm going to also show you more on this extensive margin later. Now let's move to the intensive margin. So about there's only 1 woman per team, but is this woman improving? And then there's also this question about efficiency. If there is no quota, can they still play? Okay, so intensive margin. Does the female performance increase over time or not? And or how are those gains achieved? So as I said, we focus on the top 12 teams, right? The best 12. We take the women and we compute the average ratings of those women over time from 1990 to 2015. So 1990 was the year of the implementation of the affirmative action. And here we have some numbers, 1800 to 2300. Remember that as a beginner, you start with 1,000 points, and the world champion is a bit above 2,800. Okay, just to give more sense of this number, of those numbers, if you have a rating of 1,900, today you are in the about, I mean, in the top 30,000, which is, I don't know if we should say top in that case, but you ended up in the 18% of the distribution. And when you have this rating in the 3% or in the top 500, right? So just to give you a sense of those numbers, and this has numbers today, like in 2015. And here is the evolution of the average rating of those women over time, right? So it's basically increasing. And again, the points are difficult to gain, right? So as I said, this example with James and I, we have the same rating, and if he wins the game, he will only win 7 points. And then he has to win against someone else with the same rating to gain 7 points, right? So it's hard to get those points. And also, if we compare an average woman in the 1990, an average woman in today, this woman has 80% chance of winning against this one. So they're really not the same woman. In over 25 years, there's huge improvement in the rating. So I think that we can say that the intensive margin points to very substantial positive effects of the quota. Then there's a question about what drives these gains, right? So the first is it due to new and better women, right? So they are just replacing the older one, and like it's a kind of composition effect. And I can show you evidence if you're interested that no, I mean, it's not about new women. Women, they stay during 10 or 15 years, and they increase their rating over time. Then the question about are those games driven by the extra CC games, right? So the CC, the club championship games, so they play on average like 8-9 games per year, but they play much more games in the other individual tournaments. And so the gains are coming from those individual tournaments, not from the championship, because also they are playing against each other, so they're neutralizing each other, but they are improving training and gaining points outside the quota. Okay, the other explanation could be that okay, those gains are also the same. You'll find the same gains for men, right? So they're driven by general increase in the ELO rating. And so what we do here is that we compare a woman to the marginal male teammate, right? So we order the players. We take Mr. 8 and we compare to the woman, right? And what we find is no comparable growth in the low points for men, right? So let me show you this quickly. So here we have we compare the best woman to the marginal male, right? The Mr. 8 or Mr. 7. It will be always the same man, and always the same rank. And then we compute the average difference between this best woman and the male, right? And you see that we started with like 300 points difference to 100 points today. So there is still a gap, but which could explain that we still need the affirmative action, but the gap is closing every year. And by the way, there's nothing special about this Mr. 8 because the difference with Mr. 7 is quite constant. Okay, so we think that it's not due also to a general trend. It's really something special about women. Okay, so just sum up the direct effects. We find that the quota is binding. So 1 woman per team over 25 years. But the women, they improve their performance, they improve their rating. And also we find efficiency. So we asked this question, could women play without the quota? Right? So let's remove the quota and build teams of 8 players. So this means that we reshuffle the players to construct teams of 8 players. And we find that some are good enough to be playing in the championship without any quota. Okay, and it's the improvement is slow, but steadily increasing. So if I remember correctly, it's like 1 woman, so half a woman per team. Okay, so here also I've shown you results on the best 12 teams, but those results are replicated if we go for the next 208 teams. So having more women and also more teams and more divisions. Okay, I don't know if you have questions about this direct effects, but otherwise I move to this trickle down, so to see the effects on the other women, not only those who were selected, but beyond that. Then I'm gonna investigate also the impact on men, and then the questions about are the effects due to the quota, right? Because it could be due to that they're due to also like women empowerment and or to also in other countries. So I'm going to show that France is special. I don't know if there are questions. Feel free to interrupt.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in terms of you're talking about the effect of the quota on efficiency or performance. I'm wondering if it's an indirect effect. In other words, if the quota might have generated an increase in human capital investment in females, and that is what that indirect effect, as opposed to the quota per se, is helps explain that closing of the gap. So, yeah. And do you have any measures? It wasn't clear to me if there was any clear measure of human capital or differences or trend changes in human capital formation with regards to chess to chess playing or chess skills.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you very much for this question. So I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna answer this question in this first section, because to show that are the effects due to the quota or not, right? But what we find is this increase in skill and in human capital, but we think that this is due to the quota. So that the clubs, they are nicer today to women, so they need a woman, so they're going to train those women, and this is due to the quota and not something else. That's our hypothesis. Yeah. But I'm gonna come back on that. Thank you for the question. Good one, by the way. So let me go to trickle down, which is also one possible effect of the quota, where we want to see if the other women are also benefiting from this quota or not. So here we have another data set, which is the French Chess Federation records. So we have all players registered in France and active, paying their fee to the French Federation and to their club. And so you know that today this number, by the way, is higher than in other countries. It's close to 15% of women. And you see that the number of women is also increasing over time and linearly increasing over time. And they're starting around the quota, which is not proving that it's the quota effect, but it's reassuring to see more women coming to chess due to this quota. And you may say, yeah, but also men are also entering, and that's true. But in terms of shares, we find that the share of women was like 6% before the 90s, and to this 14.5% today. So more women. Okay, and what is interesting to notice that this is the quota constraints. So the number of women required to comply with the quota, and this is the number of women playing under this affirmative action. And you see that the difference between the number of women registered in 2 clubs and the number of required women is increasing, right? So France has much more women than needed. And this trend is very something special to France. I'm going to show it. So a large increase in number and share of female chess players, and beyond the requirements of the AEA quota. Okay, so then chess is now quite popular in education, and it's like an education program. So it could be due to like young players and not adults, right? So we want to have both adult women and young women, right? And we see that the number for women and for youth, like between 0 and 19, so don't start playing chess at 0, but like around 4. So it's increasing over time. But in terms of shares, not, right? Compared to boys also are entering the chess and more over time. So the action is really on the adults. So we see like number of women and adult women entering to chess and staying. And the share is among the adults, the share of women is also increasing. Okay, so since the introduction of the quota, again, it's not definitive proof that this is the action. This is due to the quota, but we find that the large increase in the number of female youth, the shares remain constant, while for the adult female players, we find an increase in the number and also in the share. Okay, and this is reassuring, meaning that there is an extensive margin effect, which goes beyond the affirmative action. Okay, so then there's the question, okay, we have more women, but are they also performing well, right? So for this, we do something very simple. We take the top 1,000 players, so we rank them. We take the top 2,000 players, the top 5,000 players, and then we compute simply the fraction of women, right? So what is this fraction? And you see that this fraction of women in the top 1,000 is increasing, top 2,000 also. So top 2,000 is like the women that we have in the club championships. But beyond the club championships and the number of women, we see like more women also in the top 5,000, sorry. So more women and better qualified. Okay. So trickle down, we find, I guess that we can say yes, that we find trickle-down effects, so especially more adults and better female chess players over time. So then there is this question about are the effects due to the quota, right? So is France special or not? I can show trends in France to show that it's not something that it's so there's nothing in France that is specific. So for example, let me show you this quickly. So we look, for example, at the labor market trends. So for example, we look at the labor force participation for female, and we see nothing in 1990. So the labor force participation is increasing over time in France. The female employment is increasing as well. And so we don't find any evidence that in 1990 there is something specific to women, but we see something specific in chess and for women in chess in France. Okay, and I have also other evidence that if you're not convinced by the one I'm showing you, that I can show. So now let's move to the global trends, right? So compare France to other countries, and especially in countries that may not have something special for women. And one of those countries is Belgium. So Belgium has nothing special for women. So no quota, no specific female championship, for example. Okay. And what is nice also about Belgium is that we have this chess federation records, which are comparable to the one we have in France. And so we have all the registered players in Belgium. So we can compare the composition youth versus adults, for example, between France and Belgium. And then we have also data at the world level. But let me first focus on this Belgium case. Compare France to Belgium. Okay, and you see that for Belgium, we do exactly the same exercise. We compute the share of teenagers and share of girls, basically, within teenagers, and we find that it's quite constant. And the same for adults. So the share of Belgian women is not increasing in youth and not increasing in adults. And just to recall that for France it was increasing, and especially at the time of the quota, when it was constant for youth. Right? So comparing to Belgium gives you an idea that France is special, right? So among youth players, higher female share, but constant as in Belgium. For adults, we find a significant increase in France, but not in Belgium. Okay, But you may say Belgium is a small country, very different than France. So let's move to a more global view by using this world FIDE data records, because we have the rating of the players since the 70s, basically, to recent times. But there's a caveat in this data set, is that in the past, to enter this list and to be internationally rated, you needed a minimum of rating, which was 1805 for women and 2205 for men. Okay, so we call those players elite players, and we keep this benchmark, which is not existing anymore, but we keep this benchmark over time to see if there's a change or not, and if France is special. And we focus on the EU 15 countries. So there's one country which has also as a kind of quota, and if you want, I can be more specific, because this country is the UK. But basically, in the other countries, in Germany, Spain, Italy, in Portugal, there is nothing. In Belgium as well, right? So what we're trying to do is we take those elite players. So we fix the level of women 1805. So we take all the players with higher or equal to 1805 or higher, and we compare France to the EU 15 players. And we especially, what we're interested in is about the fraction of women. Okay, so the share of women within the woman group. Okay, if we go beyond chess, and if we look at the women in general, France represents around 15.5% of all the women within the EU 15. Right, so we focus on the EU 15 and on the woman group, and when we do that and we compute the share of France, it will be 15%, 15.5. So now we do the same exercise. We take the EU 15 countries, we take the chess players, and we take all the women, and we compute the share of France. And the share is very low. So if this is the theoretical benchmark, we find a huge difference between the share of French female players within the EU and the theoretical benchmark, which would be within the population, right? But then you see that this trend, right? So meaning that France is expanding at the expense of the other countries, right? And this is only focusing on the elite players, like the 1805 and plus, right? Players, but no, it's above this theoretical threshold. Now, if we get rid of this minimum of 1805 and we consider all the women, we find that the share is even higher, like 30% of the EU 15 players are French. Okay, so among the women group, so very high number compared to the very low 5% around the 1990s. So we think that there is something very special about the quota. Okay, so we think that the effects are due to the quota and not to the global trends, not something that is also happening in other countries. Okay, and the last question is about the externalities. So is it a good or a bad policy for men, right? So at the beginning, the way the affirmative action was designed was smart, because they increased the number of boards, right, from 8 to 9. So men were not displaced, and they were not against this affirmative action because they were not displaced by this affirmative action. Later on, France in 2006 decided to get rid of one board, so to go back to 8. In that case, some men were displaced. So, but anyway, as I said, also the clumps they try to allocate resources to women, right? Because they need those women. So the fact that they allocate resources to women may be detrimental for men. Okay, so to check if men are hurt by this, we also compute the share of French men among the EU 15 men. So the same exercise than before, but just here we focus on men. So the question is this share decreasing, for example, or constant? And we see that for men, there is no special effect, right? So it's steadily increasing, and it was also very low. So France was not a chess country at that time, and a huge difference with the theoretical benchmark, which is also 15 point something for men. But so we don't find any evidence of costs for men in this due to this affirmative action. So are there negative externalities on men? We think that no, and quite opposite. So let me just review the main points and talk about an applications and also an idea of the mechanism that is behind this affirmative action quota. So on the direct effects, we find an improvement for women, improvement of performance. For the trickle-down, we also find more women playing chess and better qualified women, and we don't find a large cost for men. Okay, but chess, as I said, is a very specific environment, probably not interesting per se. So let's see if we can apply this to other settings and other environments. But first, let me review the features of chess and the features of this affirmative action, right? So here it's clear the clubs, they need to have women, right? So so if we want to apply this to outside chess, we also want like from firms or university to care about women, because here the club performance depends on the woman's performance, right? So it's 1 point of a 9, and sometimes the game and the match is decided due to this female point, right? If you think like this, so this provides clubs with incentives to invest in hiring and helping to promote female players. So you mentioned before the role of human capital, and we think that that's the key, right? So the human capital of those women is increasing. But we think that's because the clubs need them and need their performance, right? So, but this may also, this affirmative action and the fact that the club performance depends on the woman's performance may also make female players feel important, right? So their point is counting, okay? It could also be that female players can inspire and mentor other female players. It probably could be that we see more women playing chess because more women are playing chess in the first place, right? So it's like endogenous, and so women may enjoy environments with more women, not only environment where there are mainly men, right? And also there is this point about this performance ability, this rating may help reducing the feeling of stigma. I'm not sure it was the case at the beginning, because I remember that between the marginal man and the best woman, it was like 300 points on average. But now this gap is closing, so it could be that this is also reducing the stigma. Okay, so giving these features and probably this mechanism and why this is positive, can we apply this to other environments? And we thought about could be applied to universities, and I think it's particularly relevant for the UK case, because imagine that the ranking of universities depend on the production of female researchers, right? So I'm sure that you know this much better than me, but as far as I know, that in the UK, the research money is based on ranking on a 5-year research output. I hope it's correct. So imagine what if 20% of the points that determine this UK ranking depended only on female research, right? So on the quality of this female research. So in that case, this is really different from having a fraction of female minority faculty, right? So it's not only about hiring a woman, it's also a matter of the quality of this woman and all the incentives to help this woman or to train this woman or to have better women at the universities. And that's it, right? So just to conclude, chess is very special, and we agree on that, but has the clear advantage of having this great performance measure, this ELO rating, and this ELO allows for international and overtime comparisons. So we can check for global trends, for example. We have access to the universe of players. And France implemented this clear gender affirmative action since the 1990s. So we have enough time to see this human capital acquisition, like the increase in skills for men and for women. So I think that it's important to study an affirmative action in three levels. So it's important to say something about the direct effect. So from the women selected by the quota. And here we find that there is an effect, at least in the intensive margin. It's also important to see the impact of an affirmative action on the other, the larger pool. And here we find more, and especially adult, but also better female chess players. And are there negative externalities on men? We don't find evidence of this negative externalities on this efficiency. So maybe we should endorse affirmative action quota. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take all your questions.
Great, thank you very much, Jose. Really, really interesting talk, and we still have plenty of time for Q&A. So if anyone wants to ask questions, please do raise your hands and go ahead. Jan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a very nice talk, but I think that the identification of the effects is, well, I'm struggling with that. I think you show us a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I guess that what you would be looking for is, can I strengthen my identification to really attribute all the things you see to this affirmative action measure? Because my guess is that if you would say, I'm going to look at, for example, the entrance of men in the chess area, you could also attribute that to this gender quota, because I saw the numbers going up as well.
Yeah, sure.
Now, if you that's one thing. So if I want to say, is that convincing? Well, some of the evidence you showed, I don't think is very convincing. Now, another way you could say, is it related to the gender quota, is use a counterfactual year, like 2000 or something like that. And then it's also not clear that you wouldn't find the same, that you could draw the same conclusions, because the problem you have is that you see an upward trend and it's going upward for a long time. And really in the calendar time period before the introduction, there is not a lot of observations. So I struggle with your identification strategy. I'm sympathetic to your findings, but I don't know whether I'm convinced.
Yes, thank you very much. So can you point maybe what do you find not very convincing or frightening? Because if I can go back to this, so for example, which is also a long trend, but for example, if I don't know how to explain this difference, which is decreasing over time without the quota, for example. So here it's this counterfactual exercise, right? It's really a diff and diff, right? It's comparing a man to a woman and over time. So how explaining that this trend is decreasing?
But the quota was introduced 1990, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it could be anything else. It could be that all of a sudden women are more likely to start playing chess. So if you would have, say, from 1970 onwards, and show that it's not decreased, so there's like all of a sudden, I would be more convinced, because you start here at the time when this affirmative action was introduced. So that doesn't tell me that is related to the affirmative action in 1990, because, well, you could say for the same, if you do a counterfactual introduction 2000, I'm not sure what you would conclude from that. You could say there is a trend before that and after that. So 2000 is really not making this happening. But since I don't see anything earlier than 1990, well, there could also be a trend there.
Yeah. So let me show you another picture that I didn't show. It's about the efficiency. So about the reshuffling of players, right? So if you so we stop having the clumps and the teams that they are. We take all the players and we attribute them to fake teams of 8 players, including a woman, and then you just compute the number of women you will have, right? So and this is the efficiency, and you see that this efficiency is increasing. This is the share of women that could have played without any quota at that time, and if you compare this to before 1990, you see this this difference, right? You are talking about like the number of women playing before that is like 0, and
yeah, but you already see an increase since 1987. I'm just trying to be advocate of the devil because
yes, sure, no, sure. You see something, yeah, no, sure, with something, but statistically, going from 2.5 to 6% is a huge increase that it takes time to. But also, if we take, for example, I have another something else that I can show you to try to convince you. For example, when we remove the quota, okay, so there is one division where they decided in 2013 to remove the quota. So they said, yeah, the quota is they wanted to remove the quota, so the French Federation decided to get rid of the quota in 2013. And so what we can do is to exploit 2 changes. One is to get rid of the quota in Division 4 in 2013, but in Division 4 also they went from 9 to 8 players. Okay, so meaning that in 2006 you have also a shock for men, right? So because you are getting rid of a man, because instead of having 8 men, you only have 7 now. And in 2013, they got rid of the affirmative action. So it's not anymore necessary to have
my bell is ringing, sorry. And it's not that I did necessarily disagree, but I have to open the door.
Okay. So let me show you anyway this evidence. And then, so women lost their special qualification in 2013. And the marginal men, they lost their spot in 2006, right? Because we went from 9 to 8. And so we ran a very simple regression where we're trying to see what happens for women in 2013 compared to men in 2005, and controlling for a bunch of other fixed effects and other explanatory variable like age, average yellow point, potential unrated status, number of game played, right? So, and club and season fixed effects, right? To try to identify the impact of the quota. And what we find is that there is an effect for man, right? It's on 5. So going from 8 to 7, this decrease was 9.4. For women, it was 29.2, right? And if you look at in the future, so what is happening in the future, like 5 years later? So what we find is that 5 years later, there is nothing for men and for men, but there is a strong negative effect of their probability of playing, the number of games they play, the number of tournaments they play, and after all, if they still are there or not, right? So, and this is if the quota is disappearing, which is the reverse of the entrance of the quota. And here it's really counterfactual because we are comparing with before and after men and women.
I guess this is a nice addition to your presentation. This looks like more convincing to me than your main line of reasoning.
Thank you. I think it's it's the same line of reasoning, but probably I should have shown this one. Yeah, thank you. Because great. I've also other graphs where we start in before the 1990s, where the situation for example also so for example this trend here, it's really something starting in 1990 about the French within the EU15. In the other countries, there is nothing. So here it's also a comparison of France before 1990, after 1990, compared to the 14 other EU countries, and how to explain this this trend, which is very different. Here it's flat, right? So before 1990. So I probably have to put more of those, but thank you anyway.
Great, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Jose, for the response. We've got either Hannah or Morris with a question.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jose. Just the question I have is related to the question I probably posed before. The question I posed before, and this is certain things bothers me, not necessarily about your results, but one thing that bothers me is what it seems that you're saying, or you're saying, that the results are saying, is that without women can't make it, so they need a quota to make it. So I'm wondering, however, whether or not you have any results or evidence that would suggest that there's something working itself out in the background in terms of off-the-market discrimination, or a reduction in off-the-market discrimination with regards to women and participation of young girls, let's say, in chess, in let's say in grade 6, 7, whatever, in high school, and things like that. Whether or not, first, the quota positively affected female participation. Did it affect off-the-market discrimination? Does it by parents against girls? And lifting the quota, getting rid of it, create an atmosphere of which would advise parents getting their girls involved in chess, because I think there's a lot of evidence that often market discrimination can be, as not only in chess, all over the place, can be as powerful, have as powerful an impact on female participation and performance. And it goes back to experience, to human capital formation. You see that with, for example, the work of Heckman and labor markets and things like that. So I'm just raising that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I lost you for a moment. So I'm sorry, but maybe I will write you an email to get your point. But
that's okay.
Because I lost connection, or but so your point is saying that there are other factors on the top beyond the quota, you mean?
Well, I'm just wondering whether or not, first of all, yes. First of all, to what extent, what evidence do you have that the quota impacts on off the market discrimination? In other words, how does it impact on how parents, for example, treat their girls with regards to getting them involved in chess? Does this change the incentive environment for parents? Let's say parents think girls can't make it in chess because they're girls, but once there's a quota, they say, if I get my daughter involved, she might make it to the top. So even though maybe the father and the mother are both sexist, but this might just, the incentive environment changes. And if you get rid of the quota, the incentive environment changes. But there might be things in the background working in terms of government policy. It has nothing to do with the quota. So it's more of looking at the institutional setting. But just those are just thoughts. Doesn't just raise those.
So yes, I mean, I think that those factors are important. I think that it could be that women, as I said, may enjoy environments with more women. So if for example, it could be that at a time they like parents coming with a little girl to play chess and only seeing men, for example, and even sometimes the toilets were also men toilets. So it's an anecdote, but I mean, it could also, and they may say, okay, no, I'm not going to let my kid here, or my young daughter, because it's only men, right? And so having more women may help attracting more women, for sure. Yeah. But then we have no evidence of discrimination in this market, except in this efficiency. So in this graph here, where based on the rating, they should have been more to play, for example. But so why is this point here and not? I mean, because I mean, between 89 and 1990, there were no big difference except the quota. So you could think that why those women were not playing before. This could be discrimination against women, but we're not sure of that. So it's hard to tell that there is discrimination in this market.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Maurice. Thanks, Jose. Next question is from Stefan.
Hi, Jose, and yeah, really great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and lots of interesting stuff there. The points I want to make, I got 3 points, which I think relate to what Maurice and Jan were saying as well, really. But the first point I think Maurice was making earlier was about the number of moves, and I do think the number of moves in a game tells you something about the extent, the margin of victory, if you will, you know, just how big a defeat it was. And since there are these databases out there now with all the games listed, surely it wouldn't be that hard to actually identify the number of moves and to see whether that had changed for victory or defeat of women in these games. So that's one thought. The second thing was, whilst you were talking, I sort of was quickly looking up what the state of boys v girls in math scores in France has been over recent years. And from just quick look, it looks as if girls have been improving in France relative to boys. And that isn't necessarily true all over the world. There are many other countries where that the gender gap has not decreased. And so that it may be that there's something specific about France and gender equality measures which go beyond chess, and that again, I guess that gets to Jan's question. And then the sort of third thing is really, it strikes me that in some sense all of this is refocused on supply, about the conditions under which children can play, or girls, boys, adults can play, whereas in some sense, and you don't really address the demand issue. I mean, to what extent do girls and women want to play chess, and has that changed over time? And sort of give you, think of an example. And no disrespect to France, but you know, the French are not terribly good at cricket. You really aren't very good at this game. What if we said that every cricket team had to have a Frenchman or woman on them for the next 30 years? Would you get better at cricket? Well, that really depends. I think there's more than just ability there, or capability. There's a desire to play as well. And I'm not sure we'd overcome your aversion to the game just by putting you on teams. So I think that's something you need to sort of address. I think you probably need to address that in the paper somehow. But I really love the paper, so really great stuff.
Thank you very much. So thank you also for the good questions, and also thanks also for the good question before. So yeah, about the number of moves, yeah. So we're not using particularly the outcomes of the games in this project, except the points earned by the players. Just for example, we try to see if women are winning points within the championship or outside the championship. And what we find is evidence that are winning points outside the championship, so outside the club competition than inside, because as I said, they're playing against each other, so they're neutralizing each other. So we're not looking at the games per se, but yeah, it could be possible still. And in this other project I have with Guillaume, we are looking at the number of moves. And what we find using the number of moves is that women tend to play more against other women, against men, even when they're weaker. So in terms of the number of moves, the length of the game is longer, significantly longer for women. So yeah, it's another gender difference, hard to explain, because again, the utility of chess players is not to minimizing the number of moves, right? So they probably are happy if they win quickly because they will be less tired. But I mean, at the end of the game, I'm sure they will prefer to win even in 100 moves than to draw in 20, right? So So I think that the utility of a player is really based on the ranking and the satisfaction of improving. But so yeah, again, in this paper we don't look at the outcomes of the game except the points that they earn. So the math score is I'm gonna check, because as I say, what we look is for example, the labor force participation, and we see that the female labor force participation is increasing over time since the 70s. So nothing peculiar about the 90s. The female employment is increasing, but looking at the math scores would be nice. Probably girls have been improving, as you said, girls are improving, but I don't know since when, and I'm gonna check if there is a trend. But it's a very good point. About the demand, yes. So we only have anecdotal evidence. So we know that so chess has been introduced in like in education programs at schools, but also there are like training sessions in clubs for women and for girls. So they like to play chess, and when it's time for a competition, and they sometimes say no, I don't want to go and to compete. So there is like this. Women are shy to compete in some other contests, but including chess. So that probably is a demand effect, that even if we have more women, some of them don't want to compete. So yeah, could be possible that there is this demand effect that's very interesting. Yeah, but in our paper we true that we focus more on the clubs and to try to see why clubs change to in terms of mechanisms. So thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks.
I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Jose. Dennis has got his hand up. A question.
Yeah, thank you. This was very interesting. I have a couple of questions. The first is a little bit, I think, related to the last thing that Stefan said, which his quip about requiring a French player on a cricket club, not improving French cricket. I thought he was going to go a different direction, and that is, think about countries that have requirements about the number of domestic players that have to be on their squads in football, and your results might suggest that those actually could be beneficial. So I'd like you to comment about that a little bit. The second issue that I wanted to raise was I think I'm more convinced by the international comparisons than by the comparisons within France only. And I wonder, you didn't do this, but I wonder if you could do something along the lines of a synthetic control to show what's happening to the trends outside of France, and compare those to the trends inside France. So those are my two thoughts, and thank you again, very interesting.
Thank you very much, Nish. So about the requirement of a French player or a domestic player, and if this would be the key or will have beneficial effects, I think this is probably part of the explanation, by the way, in France, because so in France it's required a French female player. Well, for example, in the UK they also introduced an affirmative action in their team competitions, and but without this requirement. So it's only a junior and a woman, and the woman can be from a foreign woman. So I think the fact that it's a French woman per se is probably not. I mean, it's important in the sense that the clubs they care about the woman, so they have to raise some women. While in the UK case, they can pay for a foreigner, and and that's it, right? So and that's what they do. So in the UK, in the UK, you see a lot of French girls, for example, going and playing there, or foreigners, because the only requirement is to have a female chess player in their teams. But then it could be this idea of this domestic French woman, right? But it could also be other explanations, like the other woman, they see a woman playing in their team from the club, and so they enter into the club. While in the English case, it's a woman coming from abroad, and she just stays for the day or for the weekend, and then she goes back. So that's made one explanation. So yeah, so we don't know if it's the citizenship that matters, or is it the fact that the clubs, they have really an incentive to train local players. But and we also think that international comparisons are super important, and why not a synthetic control? We didn't think about that, but yes. So, but just also tell me that for the international comparisons and for the EU15, we have data before 1990, so we can already have this difference in difference story, like comparing men and women in different countries before and after 1990. But it could be also interesting to have this synthetic control ID. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Jose. Time for a few final questions as we move towards 4 o'clock, if there are any. Ian.
So I was thinking about policy again. So in football, we've seen a big increase in the women's game, but of course they've achieved that by investing in the women's game, like not putting women on male teams or anything like that. They've increased the rewards for playing in those games, and they've invested heavily in the marketing and TV rights, etc. So I was wondering about, your different policy options here. So going back to chess, you could imagine another way to try to improve the quality of the women's game is to have higher profile women's tournaments rather than mixing men and women. So I don't know if you have anything to say about the difference between those two options. So here is an example where it looks like mixing has been beneficial for the women.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So we have a follow-up work where we try exactly to answer this question. So about the different types of policies, because also in chess, so there's this quota within the club championship, mixing women and men. This is what we look at today. But there are also other policies, like, for example, in some youth competitions, the competitions are sometimes mixed, sometimes not. So sometimes they're like a mixed competition, but beyond that, there's only a female competition. And in other countries, they also have like a female club championship, so female team club championship, so which only women. In other countries also, the quota was quite different. So for example, in the UK, it was not this citizenship requirement. In China and in Poland, they have also a quota, which is, but in that case, there is this reserved seat. So they have to play against each other and they can't move and to play against male. So we're thinking about studying these differences to see if they matter or not. So answering your question, basically. So it's a very good one.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Any more questions? Okay, well, in which case, I'm trying to, there we go. I've got the the title for the speaker for next week's talk. Thank you very much, Jose. That was a really interesting talk, getting lots of questions and discussion, really interesting policy action, lots of data to look at it, and yeah, really interesting, great presentation. So thank you very much for that. We will meet again next week when we have Jed Armstrong from New York University presenting Talking Baseball, Peer Effects on Decision Making. So we'll move from chess to baseball next week. And in the meantime, please do have a great weekend. And please do also note that the deadline for Hannah Altman's special session at the Westerns is today. So please do get your submissions in for that if you want to take part in that. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. See you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the questions and comments. It was helpful. Thank you.